Mom, you need to see a dermatologist, Gigia said casually, setting down her coffee mug on my kitchen counter. I looked at my reflection in the hallway mirror that morning. Something was wrong with my scalp. The burning sensation had started 3 weeks ago, subtle at first, a tingling after my shower that I'd attributed to dry winter air. Now my hairline was receding in patches. Actual patches. I could see my scalp through what used to be thick auburn hair. It's probably just stress, I told her. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew that wasn't true. My daughter stood across from me with that expression she'd perfected over the past year. The one that said she was concerned, but also slightly superior, as if she understood something about my body that I didn't. Gigia was 32, a chemist by trade, which meant she spent half our conversations correcting me about things I'd never asked her opinion on. She'd moved back into my house 6 months ago after her divorce from Jackson, and I'd welcomed her with open arms, as any mother would. We were supposed to be healing together, supporting each other through life's disappointments. Instead, I was losing my hair. I reached for the shampoo bottle on my bathroom shelf, the one Gigia had given me for my birthday. "Premium formula," she'd said with a smile. "Sulfate-free, made with natural ingredients. It'll change your life, Mom." The bottle was nearly empty now. I'd been using it religiously, twice daily, watching my hair fall out in ever-increasing clumps. The dermatologist appointment came through 3 days later. Dr. Peter Richardson examined my scalp under a bright light, his forehead creasing with concern. He asked me questions about my routine, my diet, my stress levels. Had I changed any products recently? "Yes," I said. "My daughter gave me a new shampoo." He took samples, sent them to a lab, called me back 2 days later with a voice that had shifted from clinical curiosity to something darker. "Mrs. Henderson, the shampoo contains sodium hydroxide. Lye, in significant concentrations." The words didn't register at first. I made him repeat them, twice. Even then, my brain refused the full meaning of what he was saying. Lye. The chemical used to strip paint from walls, to unclog drains, to make soap, which was fine in controlled amounts, but not in a concentration meant to be applied directly to human skin. "This would cause chemical burns," Dr. Richardson continued, his voice careful and measured. "Scalp damage, hair loss. If left untreated, it could cause permanent scarring and baldness." I sat in that office chair, my hands resting on the armrests, and felt the world tilt slightly. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A child's laugh echoed from the waiting room. Everything seemed impossibly normal for a moment, when nothing would ever be normal again. "Are you sure?" I asked, knowing it was a stupid question. "I'm certain. This is chemical burn damage. The pattern suggests repeated, prolonged exposure. Mrs. Henderson, how long have you been using this product?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. His jaw tightened. "And who gave this to you?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't say her name out loud in that moment. I drove home in a daze, my hands steady on the wheel, but my mind fragmenting into 1,000 pieces. Gigia, my daughter, my only child, the person I'd raised from infancy, nursed through chickenpox and broken bones and teenage heartbreak. The person who'd sat beside me when her father died 8 years ago, holding my hand through the funeral service. She'd poisoned me. Deliberately. Systematically. For weeks. The house was quiet when I arrived. Gigia's car wasn't in the driveway. I went directly to the bathroom and pulled out the shampoo bottle, reading the label with new eyes. Gigia's Premium Hair Care. She'd actually labeled it with her own name. The audacity of it made something crack inside my chest. I opened my laptop and searched for sodium hydroxide, chemical burns, lye poisoning. The images that appeared on my screen showed scalp damage that matched exactly what was happening to me. Some cases showed permanent baldness. Others showed scarring so severe that hair transplants were the only option. My daughter had done this, intentionally, with premeditation. But why? I spent that evening going through our recent interactions, searching for motive in conversations I'd thought were ordinary. She'd seemed so concerned about my appearance lately. "Mom, you're looking tired." "Mom, have you gained weight?" "Mom, your hair's looking thinner." I'd thought she was being cruel in the way daughters sometimes are. Now I understood she'd been documenting the damage she was causing, tracking the progress of her own poisoning campaign. The realization made me physically ill. I found myself in the bathroom, vomiting into the toilet while my damaged scalp burned against the cool porcelain of the sink. When Gigia came home that night, she found me sitting in the living room with the shampoo bottle on the coffee table between us. I watched her face as she entered, looking for some sign of guilt, some crack in her carefully maintained composure. There was nothing. Just her normal expression, slightly tired from work, carrying her briefcase and her phone and her secrets. "Hi, Mom," she said, setting her things down. "How was your day?" I lifted the bottle, held it between us like an accusation made physical. Her face changed. Not guilty, something else. Something colder. Her eyes moved from the bottle to my face, and I watched her calculate something behind those eyes. I saw the moment she realized I knew. "You noticed," she said. Not a question. "What did you do to me?" My voice sounded strange, distant, like it was coming from someone else's body. Gigia moved to the couch and sat down with the deliberate slowness of someone settling in for a long conversation. She crossed her legs, folded her hands. When she looked at me again, her expression was almost serene. "Do you have any idea what it was like growing up in this house?" she asked. The question was so unexpected, so divorced from the reality of what she'd done, that I couldn't immediately respond. "While you were at your charity events and your book clubs and your bridge tournaments, I was here, alone. Dad was already sick, and you were never around. You were always gone, always busy, always more important than me." "That's not true," I said, but even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't entirely false either. I had been busy. I had thrown myself into volunteer work after my husband's diagnosis, partly to escape the pain of watching him deteriorate, but that didn't excuse what she'd done. "After Dad died, I thought things would change," Gigia continued, her voice taking on a bitter edge. "I thought maybe you'd finally see me. But you just got busier. More galas, more committees, more everything except time for your daughter." "So you poisoned me?" The words came out as a whisper. "I was testing something," she said calmly. "A formula. I wanted to see if I could cause damage gradually, without you noticing immediately, to see how long it would take. To see if you'd even care enough to pay attention to what was happening to your own body." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She hadn't been trying to harm me out of anger. She'd been conducting an experiment. I was her lab rat, and my suffering was her data. "I need you to leave," I said, standing up. My legs felt unsteady beneath me, but I forced myself to remain upright. "Pack your things. You have until tomorrow morning." Gigia stood as well, and for a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, maybe? Or disappointment that her revelation hadn't had the impact she'd anticipated. "You're going to throw me out? After everything?" "After everything?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You poisoned your own mother. You deliberately caused me physical harm? And you did it to prove a point about my parenting? Yes, I'm throwing you out. I'm also calling the police. I didn't call the police that night. I sat in my bedroom with the door locked and tried to process what had happened. My daughter, the person I'd brought into the world, the person I'd loved unconditionally for 32 years, had deliberately poisoned me. The sheer, staggering betrayal of it was almost too large to fit inside my chest. By morning, Gigia was gone. She'd packed quickly and left a note on the kitchen counter. I'm sorry you can't see why I did this. I'm sorry you're too self-absorbed to understand. I'm leaving. Don't look for me. I sat with that note for a long time, reading it over and over as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They never did. The next week was a blur of phone calls and appointments. I went to the police station and filed a report. The officer who took my statement, a woman named Rihanna Mendoza, with tired eyes and a practiced expression of sympathy, listened to my story without judgment. She took the shampoo bottle as evidence. She explained that proving intent would be difficult, that Gigia could claim the formula was an experiment she didn't intend for me to use, that without a confession or clear documentation of malicious intent, the case might not proceed. But we'll investigate, Officer Mendoza assured me. And if we find evidence of premeditation, we can pursue charges. I also consulted with a lawyer. Karauna Edwards was a family law attorney with silver-streaked hair and the kind of direct manner that made you trust her immediately. She explained the legal landscape to me in terms that were both clear and devastating. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, she said, tapping her pen against her desk. Assault, potentially poisoning, depending on the prosecutor's interpretation of the evidence. The problem is proving it was intentional, rather than a chemistry experiment that went wrong. She told me it was intentional, I said. She told me she was testing something on me. And she'll claim she was testing a formula she thought was safe, Karana replied. She'll say she never intended for you to use it. It becomes a he said she said situation, except she's the chemist and you're the one with chemical burns on your scalp. The injustice of it made me want to scream. Instead, I went home and looked at myself in the mirror. My hairline had receded another half-inch. The dermatologist had warned me that without proper treatment, I could lose all the hair on my scalp within months. He'd prescribed a special shampoo and a topical treatment to help with the healing, but he'd been honest about the prognosis. Some of the damage might be permanent. I was 53 years old, and my daughter had stolen my hair. She'd stolen my sense of safety in my own home. She'd stolen my ability to trust her. And the legal system seemed designed to make that theft legal. That's when I decided to fight back. I hired a private investigator named Theosin Alvarez, a man with a reputation for thoroughness and a willingness to operate in the gray areas of legality. He cost more than I wanted to spend, but I didn't care. I wanted evidence. I wanted documentation. I wanted to build a case so airtight that even the most skeptical prosecutor would have to move forward. Theosin started by tracking Gigia's movements, where she went, who she met with, what she purchased. He dug into her emails and her social media accounts. He interviewed her co-workers and her friends, and slowly, a picture began to emerge. She'd been planning this for months. There were emails to a chemistry supplier requesting specific quantities of sodium hydroxide. There were notes in her personal files documenting her experiment. There were even photographs she'd taken of my scalp without my knowledge, documenting the progression of the damage with clinical precision. When Theosin presented me with these findings, I felt a strange mixture of validation and horror. Part of me was relieved to have proof. Part of me was devastated to know that my daughter had been this calculating, this deliberate, this cruel. "This is enough," Karauna told me when I brought her the evidence. "This is more than enough. We can go to the prosecutor with this." The prosecutor's office was interested. Very interested. Within 2 weeks, Gijia was arrested and charged with assault and attempted battery. The case made local news, chemist's daughter accused of poisoning mother. And suddenly my private nightmare was public spectacle. People I'd known for decades called to offer their sympathy, which somehow felt worse than if they'd just ignored the whole thing. I had to relive the story over and over, explaining to shocked acquaintances that yes, my own daughter had done this, and no, I didn't understand why. And yes, I was pressing charges. The trial was set for 6 months out. 6 months of waiting. 6 months of knowing that Gijia was out on bail, potentially still in the area, potentially still angry. 6 months of sleeping with my bedroom door locked and checking the locks on my windows 3 times before bed. I started therapy with a woman named Aileen Bishop, a trauma counselor who specialized in family betrayal. She helped me understand that what had happened wasn't my fault, that Gigia's actions reflected her own pathology and not my failures as a mother. It helped, but not enough. There was a wound inside me that seemed too deep for words to reach. My hair continued to fall out. The dermatologist said the damage was stabilizing, that the new treatments were helping, but that some permanent hair loss was likely. I started wearing scarves, then hats. I researched hair transplants and wig options. I learned to move through the world as a woman who'd been visibly harmed, and I hated it. 3 months before the trial, I received a letter from Gijia. Her lawyer had sent it, which meant she was trying to communicate with me through legal channels. I almost threw it away unopened. Instead, I sat down at my kitchen table and read it. "Mom," it began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to understand something. I didn't do this because I hated you. I did this because I loved you, and you never noticed. I did this because I needed you to see me, and you never did. I'm sorry for what happened, but I'm not sorry for trying to get your attention. Maybe now you finally know I exist." I read that letter 3 times. Each time, I felt something break inside me a little more. She was right. I had been absent. Not physically, I'd been home every evening, but emotionally, I'd been checked out. After her father died, I'd retreated into myself, into my work, into my volunteer activities. I'd left my daughter to navigate her grief alone, and she'd responded by creating a situation so extreme, so impossible to ignore, that I had no choice but to pay attention. But that didn't make what she'd done acceptable. Understanding the why didn't erase the what. The trial began on a cold February morning. I wore a wig to court, something I'd never done before, and I felt like a fraud in my own skin. Gijia sat at the defense table in a navy suit, looking smaller than I remembered her being. She didn't look at me. The prosecutor presented the evidence methodically. Emails, photographs, expert testimony about the chemical composition of the shampoo and the damage it could cause. Gigia's own words, read aloud in court, documenting her intentions and her progress. The defense attorney argued that it was an experiment, that Gijia had never intended for me to use the product, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing happened 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman named Janiyah Mitchell with steel-gray eyes, listened to victim impact statements and psychological evaluations and arguments from both sides. Then she looked at Gijia and pronounced sentence, 3 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 18 months. 3 years for poisoning her own mother, for the calculated, deliberate attempt to cause me harm, for the betrayal that had shattered everything I thought I knew about my relationship with my daughter. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. The day after the sentencing, I went to my dermatologist for a final evaluation. He examined my scalp with the same careful attention he'd shown at the beginning, but now his expression was different. Sadder, maybe, resigned to the reality of permanent damage. "The good news is that the chemical burns have stopped progressing," he said. "The new treatment protocol is working. But I have to be honest with you. The hair loss in these areas is likely permanent. You have about 60% regrowth potential, but these patches here and here will probably remain bald." I nodded, accepting this new reality. I would be a woman with bald patches. I would be a woman who'd been poisoned by her own daughter. I would be a woman who'd had to prosecute her own child. These things were true now, and no amount of wishing would change them. That night, I stood in front of my mirror and took off the wig. I looked at my damaged scalp, at the bald patches and the thinning hair, at the visible evidence of what my daughter had done to me. And instead of crying, I felt something else, something harder. Something that felt like acceptance mixed with anger, but also with a strange kind of strength. I'd survived this. I would survive what came next. The weeks after the trial were quiet. I returned to my volunteer work, though the charity galas and book clubs felt hollow now. I'd been exposed to a darkness I hadn't known existed, and it was hard to pretend to care about the things I'd cared about before. I also started spending time with other parents who'd experienced betrayal from their children. There was a support group that met on Thursday evenings in the basement of a church downtown. The people there understood in a way that my old friends couldn't. They understood what it meant to have your trust shattered by the person you loved most. They understood the guilt that came with wondering if you'd done something to deserve it. They understood the strange combination of anger and grief that characterized the aftermath. Through that group, I met Callus Alexander, a man whose son had embezzled money from his business. We started having coffee together after the meetings, comparing notes on the peculiar pain of parental betrayal. He understood why I couldn't just move on or forgive and forget. He understood why the wig felt like a daily reminder of my humiliation. 6 months after the trial, Callus asked me to dinner. I said yes, surprising myself with my own willingness to move forward, to try to rebuild something that resembled a normal life. A year after Gigia's sentencing, I was offered a job. A nonprofit organization dedicated to helping families heal from betrayal was looking for a director, and my volunteer background made me a strong candidate. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own family's destruction had led me to a career helping other families heal from theirs. I took the job. 2 years after the poisoning, Gigia was eligible for parole. She was released after serving 20 months, with strict conditions including mandatory therapy and a restraining order that kept her 500 yards away from me at all times. I didn't attend her parole hearing. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear her apologize or explain or justify. I just wanted her gone from my life, and she was. The restraining order made it legal. It made it official. It made the separation something the courts recognized and enforced. But the wound remained. It had scarred over, but it was still there, still tender in certain lights, still capable of aching in ways that had nothing to do with physical pain. 3 years after the poisoning, I was having dinner with Callus at our favorite restaurant when he asked me to marry him. I said yes, and I meant it, not because I'd forgotten what had happened, not because I'd forgiven Gigia or moved past the betrayal. But because I'd learned that life doesn't stop for trauma, it continues, it evolves, it offers new possibilities even in the aftermath of devastation. We got married in a small ceremony with friends from my support group and Callis's family. I wore my real hair, the hair that had grown back over the years, thinned and patchy in places, but mine. I wore it as a reminder that I'd survived, that I'd endured, that I'd come out the other side of something that could have destroyed me, but didn't. Today, 5 years after Gigia put lye in my shampoo bottle, I'm sitting in my office at the nonprofit, helping a mother who's just discovered that her son has been stealing from her. I listen to her story. I hold space for her rage and her grief and her confusion. And I tell her something that I've learned through my own experience. That betrayal by family is a particular kind of pain, but it doesn't have to be a permanent one. I tell her that she will survive this, that she will find her way to a new normal, that the person she thought her son was will never exist again, but that doesn't mean her life is over. It's just different now. Harder in some ways, stronger in others. I tell her about the support group, about therapy, about the possibility of rebuilding a life that looks nothing like what she imagined, but is real and valid and worth living. I tell her these things because I know they're true, because I've lived them, because I'm standing here today, 5 years after my daughter tried to poison me, and I'm still here. I'm still fighting. I'm still believing in the possibility of healing. The bald patches on my scalp have never filled in completely. I've made peace with that. They're a reminder of what happened, but they're not a definition of who I am. I'm not the woman who was poisoned. I'm the woman who survived the poisoning. I'm the woman who prosecuted her own daughter. I'm the woman who found love again. I'm the woman who's now helping other families navigate the treacherous waters of betrayal. My daughter is out there somewhere, living her life under the terms of her parole. I don't know if she's gotten better or worse. I don't know if she's thought about what she did to me, or if she's moved on and forgotten about it entirely. I don't know if she's in therapy, or if she's hardened further into the person who could poison her own mother and call it an experiment. But I know that I don't need to know these things anymore. I know that her life and her choices are no longer my responsibility. I know that I can't fix her, or save her, or make her understand what she did wrong. I can only live my own life as fully and as completely as I can, and hope that by doing so, I'm showing other people that it's possible to survive even this. If you're reading this, and you've experienced betrayal from someone you love, know that you're not alone. Know that the pain you're feeling is valid. Know that healing is possible, even when it seems impossible. And know that the person who hurt you doesn't get to define the rest of your life. You do. Reach out. Get help. Tell someone. Don't stay silent like I did at first. Let the people who love you help you carry this burden. Because you deserve to be safe. You deserve to be believed. You deserve to survive. Hit follow if this hit close to home.